Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. This is the weekly news wrap up for Friday, April 27th, 2018. As you can tell with the background, tractor in the background here, I'm at a farm in Missouri. I'll talk a little bit about the crop report, which is pretty good news, at least in the Midwest, and really basically all over the country. But I want to start with this, and I'm going to paint you the big picture and not do the itty-bitty details, the big picture. And the big picture is the New World Order is alive. And I don't know if they're well or not, but they're being challenged. And nothing was more evident of that. I was watching all the news this week, was the French President Macron, who was in and actually talked to Congress and got the standing ovations from Democrats. And let me just read you the headline here, which was, Macron humiliated Trump and his MAGA base while Congress cheered him on. Congress, we're talking about the Rhino Republicans and the Democrats. And let me just read this to you. Macron was, this is according to Breitbart, issuing a warning over politicians who play with fear and anger. That's a quote. Macron stressed the importance of pursuing climate change agenda, which Trump got out of already because we were going to allow India and China with 2.67 billion people to continue to pollute while we pay for it until the year 2030. Also talked about multilateralism, which is multiculturalism and open borders, and stated, closing the door to the world will not stop the evolution of the world. The evolution of the world. Let's see, climate change, so we can control you and America pay for it, and we can destroy America too. It's a twofer. We can have open borders, and anything that doesn't agree with us is playing with fear and anger if it doesn't agree with the New World Order. And this is the president of France. That it came to speak to Congress, and the people cheering him were mostly Democrats, some, I'm sure, Rhino Republicans, Republican in name only. And this is not the party of Kennedy, the Democrats. This is not the party of Kennedy. This is the a party of Antifa, of social justice warriors, Antifa is an anti-fascist, which is communist. And also, these people like to use the word Antifa, and like to use the word Nazi, which is the National Socialist German Workers' Party. That's the Nazis came out of National Socialists in Germany. That's the Nazis, not the libertarians, not the conservatives, not the Christians. That's them. And for Macron to come here and preach this and being cheered by the Democrats, because the Democrats are now the party of George Soros. He's funding a lot of them. He's funding this, Black Lives Matter, not in Chicago. He's funding this Antifa stuff. He's funding campaigns. He's kind of taken over the Democratic Party, much the way Hillary did, and they're so desperate for money. I was surprised about this. Hillary Clinton wrote a check for, according to Donna Brazile, $20 million, and basically took over control of the Democratic National Committee. She paid $12 million for this phony dossier trying to frame Donald Trump. So she bought the DNC on the cheap. And now George Soros is a big funder of the Democrats and the ultra left-wing, which is Marxist, communism, Nazism. They like to use nice words like progressive and socialist, but that's what that is. And Macron really was worried about this, again, this no signature deal, which I call the no deal deal. And then this is from the people who didn't sign the deal, and this is a statement of fact. It's not what I think. It's not a internet myth. Iranian naval commander threatens to sink U.S. ships and create catastrophic situation if Trump kills the deal. He's supposed to kill this deal by something like May 12th. It's a terrible deal. And I know Mike Pompeo just got in as Secretary of State. Of course, if you remember Mike Pompeo, he's the guy that first discovered the Iranians didn't sign anything. This is according to the Kerry State Department. You can look it up. So it's the no signature, no deal deal. How can you have a deal when there's no signatures? And Macron is trying to convince Trump to stay in the deal. You know what I would say to Macron? I would say this: sure, I'll stay in the deal. You show me where the Iranians signed it, and I'll stay in the deal. Show me where they signed it. Crickets, birds, nothing, because they didn't sign it. It's not a deal. It's a fraud. It's a complete fraud. And now with Pompeo in as Secretary of State, I suspect we're gonna unpeel the onion and find out what kind of a gigantic fraud it really is. Meanwhile, along with the Iranians threatening to sink U.S. ships, the Israelis are threatening to blow up more of these Iranian bases in Syria. They're building all these bases all over Syria. The Iranians, of course, the supreme leader wrote a book on how to destroy Israel and outsmart America. He wrote a book. So please don't write me and say there's a mistranslation of what their goals are. The supreme leader wrote a book about it, and you can Google it and look it up. So it looks like the Russians also are going to be giving more or installing more S-300 missiles, which are going to be challenging to Israeli jets, which are made by the United States. And also there could be much more of a flare-up. I think Trump doesn't want the flare-up. I think he wants to get the Mueller investigation killed. That's what Giuliani is in there to do, is to negotiate an end to all this. I told you that we finally have seen the Comey memo. Remember I told you about the Comey memo, about how they did a story about with an anonymous source, the big mainstream media people, anonymous source with a document that was read to him on the phone. Well, we finally have the Comey documents, and they basically exonerate Donald Trump. And this is how they got this investigation started with Mueller. So documents that show there wasn't any obstruction of justice, and documents that kind of exonerate Donald Trump, which is, I guess, why they keep saying you're not a target of the investigation. But at any rate, I think Trump wants to get that finished. I think he's got some indictments. A lot of people are impatient. They've heard about these 25,000 sealed indictments. I think that the deep state and the New World Order people have made their best play. And I think Macron was over here to try to embarrass Donald Trump or beat him into submission, or I don't know what he was trying to do, but I don't think Donald Trump's going to stay in this Iran deal without major changes to it. Otherwise, he would have never put Mike Pompeo, at the time congressman that wrote a letter to the Kerry State Department and said, hey, can I see those the signatures? Iran didn't sign anything. That's a statement of fact. So I think Pompeo hates the deal because it's not a deal. It's a fraud. Would I like to have a deal with Iran and actually curtail their nuclear ambitions and stop with this, ballistic missile stuff? And yes, sure, I would love to have that. That's not what this is. It's supposedly there was $150 billion up for grabs. There was nothing signed. And I want to find out what actually happened to the money. Who got the money? Did Iran get all of its money back, or were there fees and payouts to all the other countries involved in this scam of a deal that took 5 years to produce and no signatures? That's too stupid to be stupid, as Jim Sinclair says. And back to the what's going on in America. And listen, Bernie Sanders would whisper about this stuff in the past. And now Bernie Sanders, I've heard him saying, we can now talk about socialism / communism / Marxism, because that's what he is, a big communist. Here is Bernie Sanders' plan, and the Democrats are biting on, trying to bite down on this, but there's some people that, because they don't want to answer the question, where's the money coming from? Bernie Sanders to announce plans to guarantee every American a federal, that's what I put in there, a federal job. Now, this is pretty unbelievable that they will guarantee a federal job, works projects, $15 an hour. Who pays for that? Who pays for the works project? And health insurance for all. Oh, and by the way, the Dems, as I added this wasn't part of the story that I got from WAPO. The Dems want free college for everybody, which is a plank of the Communist Party, free college. That is a plank in the Communist Party, and that's what the Democrat Party has basically evolved or devolved into, basically Marxism, communism, Nazism. I mean, that's what socialism is, the National Socialist German Workers' Party. So I want to tell you this is for real, folks, and this is the real reason why that they want to disarm America, which of course is backfiring. I think the NRA, the National Rifle Association, is breaking all-time records for membership and donations, and I think a lot of people in their soul feel this. I mean, listen, Marxism, if 100 million people could talk that had a frontline experience with Marxism, they would tell you it's no good. But the 100 million people are out there, and they'll tell you if they could, because they're all dead, they can't. 100 million people died for this Marxism wet dream. And that's what Bernie Sanders is about. That's what all this mono thinking is about. And listen, if we can't change your thinking, then you don't deserve to be around. And what I think is very funny is now some of these top rappers, these top entertainers like Kanye West and others that are coming out saying, hey, we don't have to vote Democrat. Or the video that surfaced online out in California with black people saying, hey, we're citizens, and you're taking the plight of illegal aliens, illegal immigrants over citizens. Ding, 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 ding. What have I been telling black people and everybody else for more than a year? Black people, the citizens, black citizens, are the bottom of the barrel in terms of the Democrats. They're scraping the bottom of the barrel because until Trump put a stop to this, the refugees, mostly men, were the top priority of Democrats, and then second to that were illegal aliens. I told you that when I was my last year at CNN in 2008, they put out a special edict, and they said, we're no longer going to use the word illegal aliens. We're only going to use the term undocumented. That's a total BS fraudulent term because that doesn't mean we don't have a counting problem. It's illegal alien, illegal immigrant, people here that came to America illegally, and of course, as new reports show, many of them bang benefits from taxpayers like you and me, and they're here illegally. And of course, the Democrats are buying votes, and that's what that's all about. But I'd also think some headway is going to be made on the voter fraud, because remember, that was turned over to Homeland Security. That's not going to stand. But back to the African Americans, black people, who are finally waking up, and boy, are the Democrats freaking out if they lose black people. If they lose 10 or 15% of the black people that say, hey, wait a minute. Hey, wait, we're at the bottom of the barrel. We're citizens here. We grew up here, and we're the last to be considered in this equation, and before us are all the illegal aliens, all the people that shouldn't even be here. And then you have people like Kanye West that they're not going to be beat down. Listen, these rappers are tough guys, man. They're not going to be beaten down. They love it. Oh, you want to try to beat me down? And that's the nightmare of the Democrats, is to have the black people leave the thought plantation and have them go, hey, wait a minute. What's going on here? We're as Ben Carson during the campaign, who's now at HUD, he says, black people are being patted on the head. And that is the Democrats' nightmare, which is another reason why the Democrats are trying to ferociously and viciously, like Governor Cuomo in New York, allowing 35,000 convicted felons on probation to now vote. This is another reason why the Democrats are floating the idea to have 16-year-olds vote. People that don't pay taxes, but they're gonna vote on how the money's spent. It's stupid. This is why they're trying to make what is illegal legal. Cuomo also told Trump that your immigration policy is a cease and desist. They know that a big part of their election wins are voter fraud, election fraud, and illegal aliens play a big part of that, a huge part of that, which is why they're fighting Trump so hard. But it's now a national security issue because it's in the hands of Homeland Security. There's supposedly some big report going to come out that's going to shed a lot of light on the election fraud and the voter fraud. The economy. The economy's not all bad, but it's not all good. On the jobs front, we have record low unemployment, especially in the black community, which is something that Kanye West brought up and other people have brought up, that since Trump's got into office, hey, people are going back to work. A real job is better than a government check. But on the other side, we have all this debt, and the banks have a lot of problems. And one of the biggest problem banks, this is according to the IMF, is Deutsche Bank. And what's Deutsche Bank doing? They're firing 300 U.S.-based investment bankers with another 100 on top of that. Really, 400 is what the title should be. This is Reuters. And you don't do that unless you're having problems. If your business is robust and things are going great, you're hiring people, not laying off people. And the IMF, if you remember this, the IMF, tagged Deutsche Bank as the systemically most dangerous bank. And then a year later or so, this is last year or so, added 8 more banks to that. We got some real debt problems. On one side, you have Donald Trump trying to bring the economy back, which, hey, good for him. I'm for Donald Trump. But he came into office with $20 trillion of debt, and then lo and behold, we find out from Dr. Mark Skidmore that there's another $21 trillion that nobody wants to talk about, like that's some fantasy number, but it's a real number. Wells Fargo, if you look at them, that ripping off their customers. They got $1 billion fine for what essentially is just ripping off their customers because they need the money. They're capital impaired. The last public quote from Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's friend, Buffett, who's so incompetent he needed a taxpayer bailout. But Buffett's brilliant. Yeah, he needed a huge taxpayer bailout back in 2008. And anyway, I digress. But his Charlie Munger's last comment was, Warren should lay off Wells Fargo. All the big banks are doing it, ripping off their customers. You don't do that unless you're capital impaired. And Greg Manarino, my buddy Greg Manarino at TradersChoice.net, sent me a chart about the bond market. They just had the 10-year Treasury go above 3%, and that's freaking some people out with all the interest rate derivatives and how it'll choke off lending. And if interest rates just go up a half to a whole percent, they might lose 15-20% of mortgage applications. I mean, the whole thing could come apart. That's how big the debt is. That's how little variance there is. And he sends me this chart where you see the debt, the bond, the bond values go down, 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 down. And then all of a sudden, one day, boom, they go straight up on this chart, which he says it's just so rigged. I mean, that doesn't happen. That's just all of a sudden I wake up one day, bonds are falling in value. I think I'll go out and buy some. I mean, they're doing everything they can to hold rates down. I think the goal of Donald Trump is to try to hold this down to at least to after the 2018 midterms. But again, there's a lot of debt in the economy. The banks have a lot of problem. They never, according to John Williams at shadowstats.com, the banks were never really fixed. So all I can tell you is that I'll tell you one last story. So a friend of mine, his mother was on an inhaler, a rescue inhaler. And his mother died, and he was telling me about his mother on the rescue inhaler, and what he didn't realize, and I can't disclose the name, but what they didn't realize is his mother was using the rescue inhaler all the time. She wasn't rescuing herself, she was just using it as treatment. And when she finally really had a terrible spasm, guess what? The rescue inhaler didn't work. And the mama died. And that's kind of what the U.S. economy is doing. Is that we've been on this rescue inhaler since 2008. And at some time, we're going to have a big calamity. I'm not hoping this is going to happen, but every one of my guests, and listen, I know the timing's been off. Everybody's timing's been off. And who knows who would have imagined the crazy lengths they would go to, including criminal activity, market rigging, massive intervention, overt and covert. I mean, it's crazy time. Naked short selling in the gold and silver markets, although there's now a lot of people saying that they're going to take off gold and silver. I mean, it's one of the most suppressed assets going, and it's something real. And if the bond market falls out of bed with spiking interest rates, people will be looking for something real. But that market's so tiny that it'll just explode because, the whole gold market is like the market cap of General Electric, something like that. But anyway, I digress. We're on a rescue inhaler, and we're treating ourselves with a rescue inhaler. And at some point, the rescue, we're going to have a real event. We're going to need to be rescued, and the inhaler ain't going to work. So I'm just telling you, you should be prepared for some zig instead of a zag. It could be, war in the South Pacific Sea with China, or some escalating in the Middle East with Russia giving all these new S-300 missiles, and Israel worried about all these Iranian bases on their border. It could be a variety of things. Spiking interest rates. Any number of things could be a gray swan, or maybe even a black swan that could really put the kibosh on things. I'm here at a farm in Missouri. I love the birds singing. In North Carolina, the trees have probably 80% foliage. And here in Missouri, they don't. But they were in a terrible drought. Winter wheat turned brown. Winter wheat's usually green all through the winter. This year, the winter wheat actually turned brown. It was so dry. There were a lot of lakes 3, 4, 5 feet below, I mean really low. And then they started getting rain, but they still had cold weather. Still, with all that, I mean, around here in the Midwest, I don't know how the winter wheat's gonna do, but overall, the crop report says winter wheat's going to probably be up a little bit, but not as high as it was 5 years ago. Corn and soybeans are projecting that they'll be down some, corn and soybeans, but we'll see. So basically, the farm report, looks pretty good. We are out of a drought, at least in most parts of the country, especially the growing regions, and they're projecting a pretty decent growing season, which means the world can eat for another year. I wanted to thank you all. Oh, one last thing. Somebody sent me this thing, Fear is a Liar. It's a song called Fear is a Liar, and I was like, I'm going to use that. And I said, what does it mean to you? He says, well, fear that, anything that's not helping you, do things for the Lord and prepare for the Lord. Fear is something that is used by evil. And that's a constant theme with this fear not thing. I don't want you to be fearful. Because evil wants you to be paralyzed. Evil wants you to do the wrong thing because you're fearful. Evil wants you to be quiet because you're fearful. And you should not be fearful. And you should trust in God the Father and His Son, Jesus Christ. And pray. And pray. I mean, we're facing times in America that we've never faced ever. We never had an incoming elected president that was they were trying and still trying to be unseated by multiple factions in the outgoing party, the deep state, the CIA, the intelligence agencies, certain parts of it, even members of his own party are trying to get Trump to go down, along with people in the world, our allies, trying to go after an incoming duly elected president. That surfaced with the British intelligence helping the Obama administration surveil the incoming Trump administration. And who knows how deep that rabbit hole is going to go. But we actually had our allies, some of them, against Donald Trump. That's outrageous, folks. Considering what he's been up against in his administration. And some of his, one report I saw where Donald Trump's associates are drowning in legal fees. They're just trying to choke him off. I don't think it's going to work, and I think there's going to be a heck of a counterstrike coming up. But it's unbelievable what he's gotten done in lieu of the fact that all these factions, including the mainstream propaganda media, which I used to work, which are functioning their function is nothing more than propaganda. That's all they are. They're not real media. They would try to be fair. They would try to show all sides and not omit major evidence, like not doing any coverage of the criminal indictments that were suggested by Congress against Hillary Clinton, Loretta Lynch, James Comey, and his number 2 at the FBI, McCabe. That radio silence. They didn't just recommend an investigation. They say, here are the crimes they all committed. Nothing. But anyway, I digress. Listen, folks, prepare yourself mentally, physically, above all, spiritually. Prepare yourself and realize that God the Father and His Son, Jesus Christ, are firmly in control. And this is why I tell you every week to fear not. That's a term used over and over again in the Bible. Fear not. When the angel came to tell Mary, you're going to have Jesus Christ. You're going to have a baby. His name will be Jesus Christ. Fear not. Over and over in the Bible it says to fear not. So that's what I'm going to leave you with. Fear not. Prepare yourself mentally, physically, above all, spiritually. Fear not. God the Father and His Son, Jesus Christ, are firmly in control.